Hildegard Meyer. I work at WWSF Central and Eastern Europe. I'm based in Austria, and I will guide you through this exciting webinar. We will explore the current and the future financing options for nature conservation, especially focused on the Danube-Carpathian region, including the proposal for the next multi-annual financial framework for 2028 to 2034. And the aim of this webinar is to learn what is new there and upcoming, and to discuss the challenges and formulate some action points. Who are contributing? From the NaturaConnect project, we have the Institute of European Environmental Policies for the content, and Europark Federation people to take care of the technical part on board. And furthermore, we have 3 guest speakers who I will introduce later. Just to remind you of how we set up the entire webinar, so that you know how we take questions and so on. I will be shortly run through these points. So the webinar is being recorded, as you have already noted. If you have questions or comments, please type them into the chat. Marit Schnepp from Europark Federation will take care about the chat so that we do not miss any of these questions. All presentations, the recording and the report will be available later on our NaturaConnect website and will be shared also with registered people. And also feel free to rename your word and state maybe also your organization. This can be done if you click on your name. If you click on the 3 dots on top right of your name, and then you can change the name and maybe add the organization so that we know who we are talking with. And please start and stop the camera at your convenience. So the agenda of today is that we will start with a brief introduction to NaturaConnect. Maybe some of you do not know, so I will present the basics so that you know the frame of our project. Next one will be that we look into EU funds, what they deliver today for nature conservation and what the role of public funding plays. Then we will turn our heads to private funding leverage for nature conservation. And we have 2 guest speakers here from WWF Central and Eastern Europe and from the Foundation Conservation Carpathia. Then we will touch upon the topic of the upcoming multi-annual financial framework. This is, I think, for all who are working with projects in our region, a very interesting and very informative section of this webinar. We will follow with an interactive session and report back to the plenum. So we will discuss main challenges and action points for policymakers on the next multi-financial framework. And we will close with an open discussion and conclusion of the webinar. So now I would like to ask you to take your phones or you take your browser and dial into the Mentimeter, because we thought it would be nice to get to know to our audience, to know where you are from and what your background is and what you know about multi-financial framework. Marit has also put the links to the chat box. So please, if you could join the Mentimeter. If you have any problems, let us know. You're welcome to join. So, and Marit will show us the Menti surface. Okay, so the first question is, where do you come from? Let's see. We are now 40 participants, so that's good to see. Okay. I see a high coverage of almost all of our target countries in the Danube-Carpathian region, but also outside. This is very good. Let's wait 1 or 2, 5 seconds more if somebody wants to answer. I see half of the people answered who are in. I hope it's not a problem to dial in, or if you do not want to share, it's also possible. Okay. Good. This gives a nice picture where we are. Okay. I think we can go to the next question. Marit, can you please turn? So we would like to know which kind of institution or organization you present. Are you from an European institution? Are you from a government administration authority from any of the countries? Are you from the NGO sector? Are you working at a research institute or university? Are you from the private sector or from a protected area administration or others? There are three others. It's interesting. So let's wait a little bit longer to see. Okay, most are from the NGO sector, but we also do have two European institutions and some government administrations and authority representatives, protected areas. All these are our target groups for sure. Okay, good. Then, yeah. Mm, exactly. Next question is, so we would like to know which type of funding you are most familiar with. Is it EU funding? Is it, CAP pops up. Is it, I don't know, Interreg projects, Horizon projects? Is it private financing? I see life. Very good. Life seems to be most important for in this group. Horizon, Interreg, TTP, water policy. Okay, and it's mostly, let's say, public funding, as I can see from these answers. Okay, thank you. Then let's have the next and last question. We wanted to know if you are somehow familiar with this new EU multi-annual financial framework development. Have you heard about it? Uh, you are here to learn, or I see. Most of you are here to learn. Same to me. Um, okay, so thank you very much for the contributions. We will keep this Mentimeter open, so if you want to add your questions or your answers, if you want to add your answers later on, it's also possible to do so. Thank you very much. So I will share my screen again um, to, oops, to continue with a brief introduction to the NaturaConnect project. So the full name is Designing a Resilient and Coherent Trans-European Nature for Nature and People. We started back in July 2022, and the project will last 1 year longer until June 2026. And NaturaConnect co-develops knowledge, tools, and capacity to support the countries realizing the EU biodiversity strategy with its objectives that are, the extension of protected areas to 30% of land and sea that are protected, and 10% of these 30% should be protected strictly. And then based on these, on protected areas, be it Natura 2000 sites or nationally designated areas, to establish the Trans-European Nature Network. What does the project consortium look like? So we have 17 research institutions and 5 policy and practitioner organizations, altogether 22 partners that are located in 12 countries across Europe. You have the map here. And our lead is the International Institute for Applied System Analysis based in Austria, and the co-lead is the Martin Luther University in Germany. We work more intensively in 6 different case studies, so one of which is the Danube-Carpathian transboundary region. Others are more national ones or even regional ones, so we are actually the biggest one, covering 15 countries. The results up to date are we are working towards knowledge. This is what I said before. So we worked on a review of protected area and ecological connectivity governance and financing. We published 11 finance fact sheets for public and private funding options that were also linked in the registration form. So maybe you had a look. Then we have GIS database across Europe for species occurrence and habitats, and many more items I do not want to touch upon. I just picked some important ones. Then we worked on connectivity guidelines, how to plan connectivity, developed a project database, and also maps that have been recently published. We also have scenarios that could help planning the current and future natural capital and ecosystem services, as well as scenarios for land use and climate change. When it comes down to capacity building, we provided a competence assessment for nature conservation professionals working in protected areas in the ecological connectivity to see which competences are needed to work on the future Trans-European Nature Network. Then very important, I think, is the NaturaConnect learning platform that is freely available for all interested people. You can find there different modules where you can run through and learn about what we have developed during our project. So one of which is, for example, stakeholder engagement, and the finance instruments module will be online next week. And of course, we had a lot of webinars and workshops on various topics, financing 10N, models for the extension of protected areas, and ecological connectivity as part of the 10N, etc. So you can all find on our website. Okay, just to set the base for us, what is the Trans-European Nature Network? If you are not aware so far, I wanted to repeat this to us that we all start from scratch. So this is our aim. We want to have a Trans-European Nature Network. And what is it? The network builds on the existing Natura 2000 network and on national designated protected areas. And these areas should be connected using the green infrastructure landscape elements that are important for delivering ecosystem services. And the coherent 10N will include also ecological corridors, as we all know, to prevent genetic isolation of species and allow species for migration, and to maintain and enhance healthy ecosystems. So it's not only for wildlife, but also for people. Okay, this was it in a nutshell. The next one is we will learn about EU funds, what they deliver now, and why some of them are very important. And I would like to ask Oriane Flotte-Boussole from the Institute for European Environmental Policy. She's a policy assistant there working together with Evelyn, who will present later. So, Oriane, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hildegard. Good morning, everyone. Very lovely to see you all this morning. So I will be talking about the current state of EU funding that supports nature and biodiversity, with a particular focus on ecological connectivity in the Danube-Carpathian region. We will look at the current funding landscape, how funds are used in practice, and both the opportunities and challenges in using EU funds to restore and protect nature. Next slide, please. So to start with the big picture, the EU has set ambitious goals for nature protection and restoration through the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 and the Nature Restoration Regulation. But meeting these goals come at a cost. Nature restoration and protection relies heavily on public funding. The EU has committed to dedicate 10% of its budget in 2026 and 2027 to biodiversity-related actions. It has also pledged to double external funding up to 7 billion euros for the 2021 to 2027 period. These commitments are an important step, and they align with the Cunning Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This framework calls for at least $200 billion per year in the global biodiversity finance by 2030. But even with these efforts, we are still very far from closing the financial gap. At the EU level, the estimated investment need is about 65 billion euros each year. Next slide, please. The largest sources of EU funding for biodiversity are the Common Agricultural Policy, which makes up 31% of the EU budget. Other key funding sources include the European Regional Development Fund and Cohesion Fund, and the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Next, please. For our work, we looked specifically at how EU funding supports ecological connectivity, linking habitats and restoring corridors. We focus mainly on 5 programs. Next, please. We looked at the LIFE program, the European Territorial Cooperation Interreg, the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, known also as MFAF, CAP, and the European Regional Fund and Cohesion Fund. So each of these funds play a different role in supporting projects that connect ecosystems and restore biodiversity. Countries in the Danube-Carpathian regions have used these funds to support ecological connectivity. These include habitat restoration, corridor creation, and cross-border cooperation. For example, the Recovery and Resilience Facility provides the opportunities for member states to address green transition. This can include land restoration, climate change adaptation, and sustainable agricultural practices. Here we see the regional development and cohesion funds are often programmed together, and the ERDF from this slide here, you can see provides approximately 1 billion in the Danube-Carpathian region for objectives that are related to nature protection and biodiversity. Next slide, please. And here we can see the cohesion funds also provides approximately 1 billion in the Danube-Carpathian region for nature protection and biodiversity goals. If we look at some examples of EU public funds, next slide, please. We can look at the 3 Interreg funded projects, Save Green, Trans Green, and Connect Green. These projects were complementary initiatives that were designed to protect biodiversity by integrating green infrastructure principles into spatial planning and transport development. Each project contributed distinct tools and strategies and insights on how to build toward a more resilient and connected ecological network. The CAP as well can fund farmers to restore and recreate ecological elements such as hedges and trees, and to manage their lands less intensively. For example, addressing for adding grasslands or fallow unarable farmland. Slovakia's whole farm eco scheme supports farmers in enhancing biodiversity by requiring non-productive areas on arable land, pollinator-friendly seed mixes and biostrips, with stricter rules in protected Natura 2000 areas. Permanent grasslands and crops must follow ecological practices like limited mowing, pesticide bans, and year-round ground cover. The scheme, with a 530 million budget, is available on 87% of Slovakia's farmland and has over half of the eligible farmers enrolled by mid-2023. While it does not directly promote ecological connectivity, it helps make arable farmlands more friendly for wildlife, particularly for pollinators and farmland birds. However, the impact may decline in 2025 due to the changes of DIC 8, which removes the obligation on arable farmers to have a non-productive area, as well as keeping landscape features in place. While all these funds contribute to an extent to ecological outcomes, Their focus is not generally directly related to nature. These funds support these goals within a broader agricultural, fisheries, or regional development context. Next slide, please. So the LIFE program is the only EU fund that is dedicated to nature. Since its creation, LIFE has played a major role in building the Natura 2000 site network, with supporting over 6,000 sites across Europe. LIFE is particularly important for connectivity because it supports cross-border infrastructure and strategic projects that mainstream biodiversity goals. So we specifically look at the sub-program of nature and biodiversity. Next slide, please. The LIFE program has designed 2 new types of projects for the 2021-2027 period, the strategic integrated projects and the strategic nature projects. And these will replace the LIFE's integrated projects, which were funded from 2014 to 2020. So SNAPs are designed to support large-scale and coordinated action at the national or regional level. They are often based on prioritized action frameworks for Natura 2000 sites. They help move beyond isolated efforts and enable a bigger picture by planning and implementation, connecting sites both structurally and functionally. They also play a huge role in integrating conservation goals with other EU and national policies and funding, making it easier to upscale ecological networks, especially in the support of national restoration and biodiversity strategies. To qualify as a SNAP, projects must show measurable actions and targets, and they can include indirect conservation measures, and importantly, nature authorities must be actively involved. I can give you 2 examples of some LIFE integrated projects whose objectives were the implementation of the prioritized action framework for Natura 2000 network in their countries. So first we have a project in Slovakia, a 9-year project with an EU contribution of 9 million euros. Its objectives were to improve the conservation status of a particular species, including the European pond turtle, and improve the coherence of the Natura 2000 network. Some expected outcomes of this project are to include restoration and protection of around 3,000 hectares of target habitats and species habitats, migration corridors, and data collection. Another project is in Poland, a 10-year project with an EU contribution of 21 million. The project looks at the implementation of the prioritized action framework in marsh, peatland, and wetland areas in Natura 2000 sites and green infrastructure areas. Some of these objectives include, but are not limited to, biodiversity loss, reversing biodiversity loss, increasing water retention, and necessary protection measures in green areas. However, despite the strengths of these programs, there are still some important barriers and limitations. Next slide. For example, co-financing is a major hurdle, especially in countries where public co-funding is not readily available. The administrative burden is also high. Proposals need to be carefully planned, and successful applicants must manage significant reporting and monitoring obligations. The LIFE program is highly competitive. In 2014 to 2020, only 1 in 5 proposals was successful. Projects tend to be short-term, averaging to 5 years. But now with these more strategic projects, the average project period is between 5 to 10 years. So LIFE is not as much of a flexible funding tool. It is not ideal for responding to opportunistic restoration needs like emergency land purchases due to its long application process, but it provides strategic opportunities to integrate biodiversity outcomes. Thank you. Hildegard, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Oriane, for the insights of the current public funding opportunities at the European Union level, underpinned with good examples. I would like to open the floor now for some questions to Oriane. So if you have any questions, please use the chat. And Marit will pick it up and tell us what is there, and we will Oriane will answer to it. Yeah. Are there any questions so far?
No questions yet, Hildegard.
No questions. Maybe let's let people think a little bit longer.
We have one raised hand.
Okay. Yeah,
Katarina, I
think.
will allow
Hi.
you to unmute yourself.
Okay, just a quick question about the CAP funding, since it's the biggest funding on paper for nature. Is there did you have the time to actually look at the quality of the spending of the CAP money, of the green spending from CAP? Thank you.
Maybe I can answer that one. For Oriane says, I've worked on this more. So I guess you're asking about the Eastern European countries. So there are some evaluations that have been done now of national cap spending, but the main evaluation that I know of was done at the EU level. And the message is that there are some very good agri-environment programs, that there are some very powerful eco schemes. Overall, however, too much of the CAP money goes towards the direct payments and the payments that don't have any kind of requirement for nature and biodiversity. So it's, the message is mixed, as you expect. But there was the DG Agri evaluation and a series of other studies as well that have contributed to that I can share with you. And there are also messages about the Natura 2000 payment and things that make a big difference, like opportunities to cooperate at the landscape scale, the cooperation measure, opportunities to innovate in the EIP agri partnerships, and also the key role of advice and targeted support for biodiversity. I hope that provides you with some brief answers.
Thank you, Evelyn. I see I think Katarina, was it answered?
Yeah, I'll be grateful for any analysis if you have, just to hand me.
I will
Thanks.
follow up with the specifics. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any, we can, I think, take one more question, if there is one. Marit?
Not in the chat.
Okay. Then
I would be interested to hear if anyone has any examples of biodiversity or nature funding from regional development or cohesion funds from the operational programs.
Is there anybody? Please type it to the chat. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for these interesting questions, and Evelyn for the insights. And we will look for the analysis of CAP spending and its impact. We would like now to turn our heads to private funding leverage for nature conservation. So we have two examples from the region, from the Danube-Carpathian region, that work with private funding. So it's more of a philanthropic funding and blended funding. And we will have two examples. So the first one is the Living Danube partnership. And my colleague Emöke Joffi, the water stewardship manager in our office, will tell you more how this private funding works. I will. Emöke, please share your screen. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much, Hildegard. I'm going to share my screen. So thank you also for the invitation. I was asked to present about the Living Danube Partnership, and particularly the blended or combined finance aspect of it. Just to briefly ask, you see my presentation mode, right?
Yes, yes,
okay,
all
you.
fine.
Thanks a lot. All right, so I will go into the details of it and briefly present the long-term partnership setup, a bit of the results, how the funding was set up, what are the learnings, and an outlook for the future for the partnership. So the Living Danube Partnership, what this is, we describe it as a cross-sectoral partnership that identifies and demonstrates solutions towards climate resilience. We try to lead the conversation on all of these topics and establish and drive collective action, and we try to leverage funding for more results. Over the long term, how this looked like, it's basically a long-term partnership. It goes way back to 2014 with a first long phase of the partnership in the form of projects. So the way it is set up is that we have consequent phases of projects that are somehow finite and well-defined. The initial start was even before 2014 in the form of individual pilots that were implemented. And we continue along the same lines. Recurring topics are the river and wetland restoration, awareness and engagement, with a slight shift in the focus of the awareness and engagement and advocacy. In the beginning, we invested a lot in multiple baseline studies, the kind of studies that the results on which we still build our work. And then in this soul finding or direction finding brief intermezzo time, we were trying to analyze water risks and the potential for water stewardship, and then trying to see how, to a greater extent, the private sector can be pulled into this kind of projects. And the current framing of the ongoing project until the end of next year is around climate resilience and nature-based solutions for adaptation and the improvement of agricultural livelihoods as well. The partnership and the pilot partners is set up in a way that we operate with the LDP, short form on the basin level. In the first phase, we had the ICPDR as a basic partner or basis partner, and the Koch Foundation has been accompanying us from the beginning, especially in the form of funding, but also some advisory consultation role. And since 2014, we have two company entities of this private sector partner chipping in, the Koch Company Europe and its partner, the Hellenic Bottling Company. On the pilot and national levels, we work with, in the pilot implementation, especially with public sector partners such as the ministries, water basin management authorities, protected area management authorities, municipalities, country administrations, other NGOs, landowners, land users, and the usual partners. So I brought in two maps of the first phase and the current ongoing phase of the partnership to show the geographical scope of it, how the pilots are spread across the region. And the results of the first phase between 2014 and 2021 are presented here. I will go into this aspect of the partnership or of the results of the leveraging of funding and support for activities. So the way it is set up is that we come up with a joint concept for the Living Danube Partnership level. We search for different funding sources and the right implementing partners. There is a governance structure defined, and we try to reach convincing results in order to have this solid implementation of river and wetland restoration projects. And the way the funds from the foundation and now also from the company entities is used is that we use it as direct funding. We try to leverage that support, and I will explain in the next slides how, and also to go beyond the Living Danube Partnership. And there is, of course, an interaction between these. So the direct funding, or what we described as direct funding, is the complete cost coverage of certain pilots and of certain activities by the foundation funds, but also the co-funding, strict co-funding of public sector funded projects or pilots. As you've seen, this is a key challenge of the LIFE and some other PSP funds. The other form is that of leveraging support, where we use the funding for staff time for additional effort that complements public sector funded projects, so goes beyond the scope that was defined, but builds on it, and also for staff time or external support for applying for new public sector projects or further baseline studies to be funded. And beyond the LDP, this is again connected to the staff time or external support for applying for funding that goes beyond the duration of the Living Danube Partnership, so beyond the current phase of the project, and also through the conversations and to the content of the projects, inspire and activate external partners who then apply by themselves to further funding. I will go into examples. In the presentations shared, there will be more examples that you can check afterwards. So for direct funding, this is the simplest case. One of the pilots in Romania on the lower Danube, on the border between Bulgaria and Romania, two the major wetlands have been restored by WWF Romania, so by us, in cooperation with the local landowners and land users, and the funding came from the LDP. So this is the straightforward one. A second example is that of leverage support, where the funds from the Living Danube Partnership were used for a pilot that was also part of a large-scale life restoration project, and with a lead partner that is the National Park Directorate. And part of our funding was also used for studies and additional time to be used for this project. Then a third example case is again from the lower Danube in Bulgaria this time, where we worked together with the National Park Directorates, and the funding was used for a pilot that built on existing infrastructure from a previous World Bank funded project. And it basically improved the conditions, but also the know-how for using it. And then based on the learnings from this project, but also from the success, the National Park then continued applying for further funding. These are the three examples, but there will be further more in the presentation shared afterwards. So how to get beyond LDP, I would summarize it around the parts of introducing concepts and establishing them and bringing them in discussions where they haven't been present before, demonstrating these concepts in application on certain pilots, and then building on success stories and know-how from similar projects across Europe, and supporting the cooperation, but also by incentivizing private sectors such as banks, insurance sector, and corporates to invest in nature-based solutions. And then the results are can be seen in some of the follow-up projects that were either actively applied for or have been applied for by some of the partners that we have been implementing with. So learnings about partnership and funding, there would be around the joint concept that drives the work, around the governance structure that allows for this kind of flexibility and joint shifting and combining of funds, but also around the strong partners that can implement good pilots, and the stepwise achievement of convincing results towards a joint concept and jointly defined goals. And over the long term, what we plan to do is to continue to build on this long-term ambitious partnership based on trust and driven by the jointly formulated overarching objectives. And we plan to scale up the partnership and continue to leverage the funding, extending more and more towards the private sector that could be pulled into this kind of projects. But we continue to place the benefits for nature and communities at the center of the partnership. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Emeke. It was very interesting to see how this Living Danube partnership works with some details and examples. If you have any questions, please put it to the chat, but we will pick it up later when after Mihai's after the next presentation. So I welcome Mihai Soria from the Foundation Conservation Carpathia, and he will present this exceptional example because there is a group of people that started couple of years ago to build a protected area in the Fogarach Mountains. And Mihai, the floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Right. Good morning or good day to everyone. Thank you so much for the invite. I will share my screen right away. All right. And I think it's on the screen right now.
We can see. Mm-hmm.
I must admit that my presentation may not be so complex as Emoke's. I'm working as a educational specialist at the foundation, so I try to pick up all the data relevant for today. Just a little bit of context for maybe the people in the presentation that do not know things about this foundation. So the Foundation Conservation Carpathia, it's started in 2009, and now we are probably one of the biggest conservation programs in Romania. We are focusing mainly on species reintroduction, like European bison and beavers, and ecological reconstruction. But also the educational programs that we are having, it's one of the most important things that we are doing. So, just 1 second, I see that my slide, yeah. There you go. A little bit of context. As I told you, in 2009, the foundation was started by Christoph and Barbara Promberger. Probably some of you already know about them. They came to Romania to do some wolf studies, but then they saw the incredible potential from the Romanian wildlife, especially in the Fogarach mountains. And also when they first came here as researchers, they also started the first business, their own business, the Equus Horse Riding Center. This is important because this is how all the financing situation happened to our foundation. In that period of time in Romania, there was a lot of ecological actions that were not necessarily the best examples, like illegal logging, trophy hunting, habitat loss, stuff like that. So the need of preservation and protection of nature was really, really important in that time. Also, a very important thing in 2014 in Romania, the retribution law came, so that was all the forests from the confiscated in the communist era were given back to the people. So basically, this was the moment when we, or at least Christoph and Barbara, decided that the first thing that we need to do is to actually own the land that we are going to administrate and to protect, because, as I told you, the the government situation was not perfect in any sense. So yeah, the need of buying land appeared, and since then, since 2009 until now, 2025, we are having now a huge infrastructure, in my opinion. So we are speaking about 28,000 hectares of alpine meadows and forests that are in the property of the foundation. One big educational center, and soon to be the second. Almost 3 visiting centers. logistic buildings, and whatever you can imagine, cars and huge projects. We are almost 160 employees. So as you can imagine, a lot of fundings needs to be present in our foundation in order to be active. So yeah, those are just a little bit of pictures of what it's happening to us. So you can see, for example, in the first picture, the mountain huts that we are owning on the travel, eco travel project. Also the hides in the right, upright, you see the educational center, the visiting centers on the bottom left, and also some pictures with the kids from the activities. We are having almost 75 junior rangers, for example, in our educational programs. So just for a little bit of context. As I told you, we are having a lot of big projects going on, but I will give you just this particular example, the ecological reconstruction program that we are ongoing developing. So as ecological restoration actions, we are having more than 6 tree nurseries and over 5 million saplings planted, right? Hundreds of kilometers of exploitation roads restored in the Fogarash Mountains. Also introduction of very important old alpine species like sweet pine and dwarf pines that are helping restore the alpine meadows. Extracting patches of monocultures, because in Romania was a big problem with the monocultures in the communist area, forest for exploitations, right? So we are trying to extract some of those monoculture forests and create open areas for native plants. And also, I think it's a very important note that this reintroduction program that we are having, the beavers and the bisons, are also helping those two species at the ecological reconstruction program, right? But now let's speak a little bit exactly on our topics. So the two main source of financing from our foundation is, first of all, national and Romanian financing, and of course international financing. At the national and Romanian financing topic, we can mention the grants from the government. For example, right now, all this year 2025, our educational programs like the junior ranger programs and the kid camps that we are having, and the school programs that we are having, they are funded by a national program. All the employees at the educational centers, they are all paid by this government fund. We are speaking also about private Romanian donors. We are having a lot of smaller projects like tentacles from an octopus that are going on. For example, we have this Adopt a Birch Tree program in which people can actually not necessarily buy the tree, but they can actually buy a story that will be written on a QR code on that tree. We have a specific forest, and people who go to that forest can actually scan that QR code, and they can see a lot of interesting stories of the people that bought this birch tree, right? Or we also have the monthly subscriptions, like the €5 or €3 subscription to our newsletters and projects by telephone or stuff like that. So it's maybe something that you also already do. And also we are having a lot of private Romanian companies that are donating consistently, monthly, money to us. We are speaking about two types of funding. They can be restrictive or unrestricted funds. When I say restrictive, there are some companies that give us money only for specific projects. For example, Ursus, there's a beer producer in Romania. They are giving us some money for mitigating the human and bear relationship. So whenever we are having in the communities projects problems with bears interaction, we are having those funds from Ursus, right? And also they can give the law in Romania says that they can give us 20% from their tax profits instead of giving them to the government. So actually private companies can redirect those 20% from their tax profits to us. And we are having quite a lot of those companies that are doing so. In terms of international financing, we are cooperating with big international foundations, as you can see in my presentation, like with the foundation. We are speaking about private investors and international companies that also have an interest and want to protect the Romanian capital. As was mentioned before, we are also using big European grants such as LIFE, SUPERV, or ALP, the Endangered Landscape Program. As I told you, of course, some of those partners are very restrictive and they're very careful on what kind of actions we are spending our money, but others are just offering the money for the big projects, and we can actually decide for ourselves where the money, so we can play a little bit with those money and maybe cover other projects that are not so well funded. It is important to mention that some of those partners that we are having, they are with us from the beginning, right? Like Jack Wolfskin. So all of our 160 employees, because we are sponsored by Jack Wolfskin, we also have the gear and the technical clothes that we need to do all of the field trips and action that we are doing, right? And I think a very, very important note here is that our funding department, it's maintaining a very close relationship with all of our partners. So we are trying to offer them monthly field trip, wildlife tour, info trips, whatever. We are trying to have an open and often chat with them, and we are also sending a lot of reports. We are sending a lot of proof of how the money it's spent. And in my opinion, this is maybe the hardest challenge that we are having, to maintain all of those relationships. And frankly, in nowadays, some of our donors and sponsors are reconsidering their sponsorship just because of the, I don't know, the world situation. And of course, Romania, it's in a little bit of maybe tense geographical position. So this year in 2025, we are facing this maybe not threat, it's not yet a threat, but we are facing this situation in which we must reconsider or relook to other funding options. Also, it's very important to note that it is very important not to have only, of course, one type of funding. So having all of those private and public companies and persons that are helping the foundation is very important. We cannot rely on one single income. And also, I would like to mention that the foundation also have, not in a business way, but we are having those other programs that are also creating a little bit of capital and financial support for us. For example, we are having a big food hub around the Făgăraș Mountains, and producers from there, they are selling their products, like food products, throughout the foundation. But it's almost, let's say 99%, it's a social program, so we are not having any kind of big return here. We are having this travel Carpathia infrastructure, like wildlife hides and a biodiversity farm, in which people can actually book tours, and they can stay overnight and have lots of ecotourism services, right? We are also having those private educational programs. Sometimes we are going to maybe private schools or schools from big cities, and we are trying to convince them to come to a camp, but they will pay basically almost double the price for that camp in order for other kids that do not have the same possibilities to come into one of our camps. And also we are having quite big public events like festivals and so on. For example, you can see in the left top, those are some images from our hides. On the right, you can see some of our products that we are having in the food hub. The biodiversity farm, it's on the left down. And also there's an image from our biggest festival that we are organizing, Făgăraș Fest. For example, this year we are speaking about 6,000 people that participated, bought a ticket, bought products from there. So there was also a method for us to get a little bit of a return.
I would like to thank you for presenting this very impressive example. And it turns out also from the other presentation by Emöke that that diversification is key, and also building trust with the private funders. So I mean, we can maybe take one or two questions, but all the questions you put to the chat, they will be answered in the report later on. So if you have any burning question, please put them down, and we will have maybe one question that we can answer if there is any. Marit, can you see some?
Thank you, Hildegard. No questions in the chat besides the ones from Evelyn to Möcke. She already answered them. I'm not sure if we have time to summarize them shortly because the answers were quite long. So one was about the main barriers for companies to engage in philanthropic funding. And the other one was about the proportion between private and public funding, both for Möcke.
Okay. I see that we run out of time a little bit, so we would like to continue with the next part of our webinar that deals with the new multi-annual financial framework that is upcoming and is in development. So I would like to give the floor to Evelyn Underwood from the Institute of European Environmental Policy based in Belgium. Evelyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hildegard. Yes, we very much look forward to talking to you in a minute about your experiences with public and private funding, but we thought you would want to hear about what the Commission is proposing for the next phase of EU funding. So I will describe some key parts of the Commission proposal, which was published in July this year, and some of the many reactions to it since. So I will describe it as if it is going to happen, but of course anything may change during the negotiations, so none of this is set in stone. Next slide, please. The many EU funds will be grouped mainly into three new large funds. And one of them, the new European Competitiveness Fund, will continue to be managed centrally by the Commission. It will include a substantial increase in the Horizon Europe budget, and it includes some of the LIFE programme priorities with a heavy focus on innovation and competitiveness. The new National and Regional Partnership Fund, this will have over half of the money in the EU budget overall, and it will group the current Common Agricultural Policy funds and the cohesion funds and some smaller funds. And all of these will be co-programmed by the member states and co-funded by the member states. There will be a horizontal regulation that will cover all of the funding, and this will establish a performance framework. Notably, it will apply the do no significant harm principle to all of this funding. And it defines the way in which funding will be reported. So this is done by intervention fields, which are labels for reporting and tracking the purpose of each piece of funding. These are already used for cohesion funding, but the list is longer in the proposal, which is one of the good developments because it will enable better tracking of nature and biodiversity funding. And overall, a target has been set for all of these funds to spend 35% on climate and environment. So this target will group climate, environment, and circular economy, and nature and biodiversity is falls under environment, so together with water, soil, air, and so on. So it's more ambitious than the current target, but at the same time, there is no separate biodiversity target, unlike the current MFF. Next slide, please. I will say some more about the National and Regional Partnership Fund. So this new fund will have a national and regional partnership plan defined. This is something that member states will need to agree with the Commission. This will go beyond what the current partnership agreements do, that provide a kind of umbrella for the EU funds. And the Commission proposes that it will contain milestones like the current Recovery and Resilience Facility plans do. So there will be requirements to member states to achieve policy developments and reforms, and the Commission can withhold funding if these are not achieved. Alongside this, there will be Interreg, so this will continue as a programme, and obviously it can't be programmed at the national level, so it will continue more or less, seems, in the way it is now. But a key feature of this reorganisation is this increased flexibility that member states have, and they're actually being encouraged to shift budgets between the funds according to their priorities. This is something that they could already do to a certain extent under the current regulations, but they don't do it for various reasons. With a notable exception that there's a ring fencing of some of the CAP money. There will continue to be specific rules for the cohesion policy and the CAP funding in regulations, and there will be specific planning. So there will be CAP strategic plans and I guess operational programs. But these will have to be much more connected, and the explanation will have to be much more within the context of the whole. This new mega fund has 5 objectives. None of these actually mention environment in the headline. They do in the sub-objectives, but there, in fact, nature and biodiversity is put into a long string of priorities on the environmental area under the sub-objectives for sustainable prosperity and for quality of life. So this differs from the current Green Europe objective of the cohesion funds. Next slide, please. So will the next MFF be better at mainstreaming funding for nature and biodiversity? This depends a lot on whether the right objectives and targets are set in the regulation that enable funding to be directed to the needs and for the environment ministries to push for where funding is allocated. Currently, the proposal actually places a lot of responsibility at the national level to determine how and to what extent biodiversity is financed. And we know that that depends on who makes the decisions, that there are a lot of pressures that counteract this. And there are not that many levers for the Commission to go against this. So there are currently no rules that ring fence funding for certain objectives or policies, apart from the CAP, as I said. And there's definitely no dedicated nature fund. As you know, the funding process is a strong competition between sectors and between government departments. The proposal does say that the National Fund Plan must be coherent with the National Nature Restoration Plan and the National Energy and Climate Plan, but it's not clear how this coherence requirement will work and what power the Commission will have to enforce it. So it's really the same kind of situation as we had with the current MFF. The flexibility could be an opportunity if it's used to create joined up funding for nature and climate. On the other hand, it could mean that climate is prioritised over nature. There could be an opportunity in this new emphasis on policy reform milestones, which would only happen if there were clear milestones on improving the enforcement of environmental legislation and good indicators and measurements of impact. So it's positive that there are more intervention fields, but at the same time, there's a real lack of good indicators for measuring impact on nature and biodiversity, and an urgent need here. And there are also questions about the proposed tracking system. I won't go into the details now to save time, but please ask me in the discussions. And also there are specific concerns about the proposals for the next CAP. But if I move on to the next slide, the question is now, what is happening now and what can you do? So the negotiations have just started. This week, in fact, there were 2 council meetings. The environment ministers met, and there was a strong push at that meeting for the continuation of life and concerns about life. And there were also calls to dedicate funding to the Nature Restoration Regulation. On the other hand, the General Affairs Council also met, which are other people in the government, obviously. And here there was very little focus on the environment and lots of welcoming of the new focus areas of defence and security and competitiveness. There are also concerns about how the CAP and the cohesion funding could be maintained as visible, separate programmes. So this new fund has raised lots of fears about that. But probably the bigger issues right now are that there are very large divergences between the member states about whether the EU should be spending more money or less, whether there should be a geographical allocation of the funds or not. So these are the sort of bigger level fights that have to take place. We're very interested to hear about your concerns and priorities in a minute, but just a few signals of what could be done now. So there is actually a letter that's circulating calling for the LIFE programme to be reconfirmed as a standalone funding mechanism. WWF can provide you information on this. It actually has to be signed by tomorrow and has to be signed by organisations. But in the longer term, there's a need for proposals for how to define policy reform milestones for environmental legislation to improve the implementation and enforcement of environmental legislation. There also could be an opportunity to write into the plans milestones that improve the capacity in governments and the agencies to deliver biodiversity funding, because there will be a discussion in a minute about the bottlenecks here. And as I said, we need better indicators, we need better tracking and weighting. So not to take up more time, I will now introduce Frank Vassen from the Nature Unit of the European Commission's DG Environment. Frank has worked for many years for nature conservation in the EU through the EU nature directives, the EU biodiversity strategy, and he is an advisory board member for the NaturaConnect project. So he will add his thoughts on the Commission proposal. Thank you very much for doing this, Frank. And after that, we will go into the breakout discussions.
Yes, you're very welcome, Evelyn. And yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, after Evelyn's intervention, I don't know what to say anymore because it was really very complete and comprehensive. And I think you mentioned everything that is important at this stage. Maybe just perhaps to put a bit of an accent on what is still left, basically. So I think, first of all, it's important to keep in mind that theoretically, everything that has been financed so far can still be funded in the future, and in particular under the national regional partnership programs. So there is nothing that is by default excluded, but I think Evelyn also mentioned it very clearly. There is no priority anymore for nature. There is no ring fencing. There is no earmarking for nature. Of course, there is this 35% requirement in the EU budget to spend for environment and climate, and nature is only a a part of it. So that is in itself not any guarantee for any nature funding. So what's really left at this stage is the reference to the national restoration plans, and I think this could be potentially an important tool in the future, especially if I compare it with the role that the PAF has played in the discussions under the previous CAP strategic plans, where actually we had a similar mechanism from the Commission's perspective to look at the plans. But in fact, I recognize this is indeed a bit uncertain, and we don't know yet how this will work. So indeed, the future doesn't look very bright for the financing of nature from the EU budget in the next MFF. And unfortunately, there is not much else I can say at this stage. Looking at what happened so far, I think that it is also important to recognize that in the capacity to absorb funding, EU funding for nature, is very heterogeneous within the European Union, and some member states over the last decades, in particular thanks to LIFE, but also to some of the other programs like Interreg, have really managed to build a lot of absorption capacity. So we have countries where there is really a lot of knowledge on how to restore, how to do more conservation work, and keep in mind that the majority of LIFE funding in the past has really gone to restoration measures. So that was also one of the reasons why we felt reassured that it would now be time to scale up and to go towards a proposal for a nature restoration regulation. So that capacity exists in some member states. And where there is a capacity, there is also a demand. And in some of the countries, we see this is really running well now. This is really a machine that is launched. And we would expect that for those member states, politically speaking, it will probably be a bit more difficult to kind of totally cut the funding for nature in the future, because there is a capacity there is a demand. There is also public acceptance that is often a bit higher, or at least in a significant part of the population. And then we have other countries where this unfortunately never happened. We never went to that stage, and a lot of these countries are more in the south and the east of Europe, and we don't know what will happen there. So in fact, I think this is really the big risk, is that in some member states there will be hardly any more public funding for nature, because there is no requirement for them to invest into nature, except perhaps with the role that the national restoration plans might have in the future. And because of a potential role of these plans, it will also be extremely important that these plans are submitted in time. So this is perhaps an important message, that there is a need to submit these plans in time. And we have already some echoes from some countries that they might be delayed, because it's indeed a very challenging and ambitious process. And I think that in view of the potential role that the plans might play for the future MFF, I think it is even more important that they are submitted in time. So it's not just an issue of legal requirement for the deadline. It is also an issue about the financing and the availability of financing in the future. Now, Evelyn also mentioned that in fact everything is still open in the discussions. In theory, there could be something like a dedicated fund for nature and biodiversity in the future. But objectively, we had similar situations in the past. For example, there were attempts to basically give the LIFE budget to the member states. I remember this was already the case in 2007, for example, for different reasons at the time. But this time it's different. I think the political constellation is less favorable than it was in the past. The availability of budget will be reduced. There is less funding would be available for even for the CAP. There is there is a squeeze of the different priorities because we have these new priorities on defense, on competitiveness. We also need to pay back the recovery fund loan that will take 10% of the EU budget annually since starting from 28. So there is a lot of competition for the money, which makes it even more difficult. So it means that in the future, we really need to be smart. We need to look at new opportunities and new links. I heard in the last year, well, there might be ways to use some of the defense funds for the re-wetting of the borders. It sounds a bit like a crazy idea, but perhaps there is something in it, and there might be other ways to find new allies for nature conservation and restoration. But indeed, we are leaving a certain phase. We are entering a new phase, and we need to be creative. And unfortunately, there is not much more I can say at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Frank. You already have a question in the chat. I'm back to you, Hildegard, too.
Yeah. So thank you very much both for presenting these new dimensions of EU funding in the future. I think it was a good insight of what will be changed, and there are really dramatic changes now, also in this geopolitical context we are in now. So if you have any questions, I think we can take maybe one, but we are really struggling with time. But I think it was all very informative and interesting. But Marit, I saw there is one question in the chat. So maybe we take one, and the others, I promise, will be answered in the report. Okay?
Yes, one question to Frank in the chat. The national restoration plans will be more important than PAFs. PAFs.
I would expect so, yes, because the PAFs, in fact, this is based on a requirement in the Habitats Directive Article 8. It's a requirement for the Commission to establish the financing needs for nature. And it is not a legal requirement for the member states. They did it on a voluntary basis, and it allowed us to sum these needs up to make an EU level need for nature conservation and restoration. Restoration was also included, but not at the same level of ambition than in the nature restoration regulation. While the national restoration plans, that is a legal requirement under the nature restoration regulation. So it has a different dimension. Now, this being said, if that requirement for the national and regional partnership plans to be in compliance with the expectations of a national restoration plan is kept in the MFF discussions in the coming years, then it might indeed become an important tool. But how this plays out in reality is an open question. But I think there is a real potential there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Frank. I think, if you have any questions, please put them to the chat, and we will answer them after the meeting. Now I would like to ask Oriane to introduce us to this interactive session that I promised in the very beginning. We will break in 3 groups, and Oriane will be explaining what it will be about.
Thanks, Hildegard. I'll be very, very brief as we are short on time. But we will now be moving into the breakout groups. We will be divided around 3 different themes. And these insights from today will help us build recommendations and practical solutions as we continue our work for NaturaConnect. So the 3 groups, the first one is on mainstreaming nature priorities in the next MFF. So this group will focus on how to better integrate nature priorities, including in the National and Regional Partnership Fund. There will be some guiding questions, such as how can the new national investments and reform plans set an objective or milestone for the Trans-European Nature Network? Group number 2. Next slide, please, Hildegard. This will look at overcoming bottlenecks to accessing EU funds for nature. So this group will tackle the frustrating but familiar barriers in securing EU funds for nature. The challenges will range from the lack of access to funding, administrative burden, and the broader issues of biodiversity being deprioritized across sectors. And then the last group, group 3, will look at how to use EU funds to leverage private financing. So this group will discuss how public funds can help unlock private capital for nature restoration. Before you go in the groups, we will have a facilitator and a note taker that will guide you through the discussion. And then we will come back and report in the plenaries. You will have 20 minutes in the breakout groups, and we'll get a 2-minute warning before the groups close. Enjoy the discussions, and I think you should now be able to join the groups.
Hello.
Hello, hello, and welcome back.
Thanks. And sorry for the people on my group. Time was flying very
true.
fast, so hopefully you can further share examples and experience later on, so we can really include that in our report and our outcome of the meeting for sure. So.
Okay, as we are back, maybe Sophie, you want to shortly present in 1 minute what the most important topics were in your group?
Yeah, I can do. Of Oriana, if you can also, because as you took notes. If I can see. Yeah. Yeah, so I see it. And yeah, I can do and then Oriana, you can add. So we highlighted a number of important aspects related to how to the question here. So a reference was made to the payment for ecosystem services, which is an established concept already for some time, and this is now gradually going towards the nature credits. And we talked about some issues that participants in our working on our discussion group has been encountering, but also then the potential it still could have on the longer term to really contribute to better conservation and restoration of the Trans-European Nature Network. Then we also confirmed the importance of need to diversify funding, but also the need to have substantial capacity and expertise to look to in, because it's not something you start in 1, 2, 3. I think, and often for that phase already some funding is needed, so that someone in the organization can dedicate some time to look into the different options for this type of funding for specific projects. So I think this is an important element. And then another element was also just still there's an ongoing strong need for more awareness about ecosystem services, just more the basics. So why would anyone, even a company, would be willing to pay for an ecosystem service, or even for nature to be better conserved and restored? So this is all a bit interlinked. So this also needs a more longer term effort to increase and keep up this awareness. And then I think finally, before the meeting ended, the element of security and stability was mentioned, because when you start to engage with the private company or an organization interested, there need to be already trust building from the start. So on both sides, you can go ahead and explore the different opportunities. Yeah, finally, a very concrete example was also given by the colleagues in Romania of a nature credit system, which is being developed now. And which could have some potential for upscaling. So I think we can go to have a deeper look in it and maybe share it with afterwards, so it can maybe be an inspiration on this topic. Yeah, thank you. Jan, anything to add?
No, I think you summarized that really nicely. So nothing on my end.
Okay, so thank you very much both. Maybe I can ask Evelyn to shortly reflect on her breakout group.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we had a mix of NGO people and people with experience in public authorities, which is very interesting. So the proposal for the next MFF had raised a lot of fears and concerns, and it was interesting to explore that. Particularly the worry that if the life opportunities for nature become something that's directed by national authorities, they will not create opportunities for NGOs to obtain funding or anybody outside of public authorities. The money will go to public authorities. And this will really lack the ambition that is needed to achieve large-scale restoration, because the public authorities don't have the capacity to deliver that. There's also a risk that the bridge will be broken from Interreg, which is really important for strategic planning, to then real actions and investments through life, and then for scaling up through something like Horizon, if these funds are no longer directed and managed at the international level. Also call for the need for international funding to be coordinated by bodies like the ICPDR, and the importance of having national level networks intervening in policy discussions. So the municipalities are, for example, associated in national associations. They need to really speak up and have a voice. Overall, the discussion really for me emphasised the key importance of Interreg in life, and and their continued link to leveraging funding post projects from other sources.
Thank you, Evelyn. Sounds like an interesting discussion, but also with this insecurity, how this really will shape up. Yeah, we need to be alert and see that funds go in the right direction also for nature conservation. From my side, I had these overcoming bottlenecks for for NGOs and small enterprises. And it was said, I mean, we had many people on board that have experience as a small NGO or as a bigger NGO, helping smaller NGOs as a protected area. We figured out that it would be nice to have a unitary platform for different programs, also for the reporting, and also for finding people, so that there are interested people listed, and the donor should actually provide more trainings or capacity building events for these smaller organizations to be ready for submitting such a project. What else did we discuss? Yeah, actually, this was what I wanted to say. And also, one idea was to reduce the reporting period so that the cash flow that is really a problem for smaller entities could be overcome a little bit easier. But yeah, and it was also practice. This is what I heard. This was interesting to me. Yeah, this is in a nutshell what we discussed in our group. Maybe Elena, you want to add something?
No, I think that highlights the main points.
Yeah. Okay, good. Then we can close this chapter of breakout groups, and I would like to ask Evelyn for a reflection on the past discussions, please. To have some conclusions.
Thank you, Hildegard. And thank you all for your insights. And the question you're asking is, well, what will this achieve? So what we were going to do is gather together all your points and use them to shape the policy messages that we will be communicating from the NaturaConnect project. We will also give you feedback through the report from this event. Overall, I think that a lot of what you said really confirms and reiterates the findings that we came out with in the fact sheets we produced about the pros and cons of the different funding sources, but also raised some really interesting points about the need for the specific needs. Also, we need to think much more about how private finance can be leveraged in the right way and in a way that builds lasting and effective partnerships. So we will be looking at that more in the future as well. If you're interested in the planning tools that NaturaConnect is producing, which will be a lot of maps and data on habitats and species and priority areas for ecological corridors, then please engage with the project, engage with the learning platform, and join our future stakeholder events.
Okay, thank you very much, Evelyn, for this nice summary. What I would like to do is to talk a little bit about the next steps that will be the case in the NaturaConnect project. So what Evelyn already said, the recording, presentations, and post-workshop briefing will be made accessible on the NaturaConnect website. Participants who registered will be informed about this. Then we, as I told in the beginning, we are running a learning platform that is filling in by developing our results of NaturaConnect, and the next module of this learning platform will be launched at the end of October, and it's about financial instruments. So if you are interested, please, I left the website address here. Then the next webinar for the Danube-Carpathian region will take place on 11th of November. It's about linking blue and green infrastructure in the Danube-Carpathians, prioritizing rivers, wetlands, and landscapes. So this is a more technical webinar where you will receive the invitation very soon. And then also, if you're interested to take part in the stakeholder event From Science to Action, Strategic Planning for the Trans-European Nature Network, you can still send us your interest, and we can still invite you, or still you can still register to come. It will take place in Brussels, in Belgium, on 26th and 27th of November 22. And now I would like to close with asking you to take your phones and please fill in this evaluation survey for the webinar. It would help us to improve. It would help us to reflect on the seminar. So please, if you can fill this in and let us know how you were satisfied with the webinar. And on this last page, you also find all the necessary links for the website, for writing us an email, for the Facebook, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky channels that we are filling in with information. So thank you very much. And yeah, we are 4 minutes early, but I think it's fine. Yeah, thank you very much, and see you soon.